Hello, bonsoir, Annie. Welcome to another virtual Science North Star Party. Happy nearly anniversary of the moon landing. That's coming up on July 20th. So my name is Oletha. I'm the staff scientist for Space Place and the Planetarium at Science North. And this is Lucy.
Hello, everyone.
Hey. So Lucy is the science communicator for the Planetarium at Science North. And we have two very special guests today. We have Cass, who is science advisor for the Canadian Space and Aviation Museum. And we also have Kirsten, who is representing Space Place in Toronto today. She's going to be talking to us about their idea for a planetarium in the city. So we are streaming to you from Sudbury, Ontario. We are on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Atikamekw, Anishinaabeg, and Wanapitei First Nation, and we're in the Robertson Huron Treaty area. Those of you joining us live, please do tell us where you're watching us from. Go ahead and leave it in the comments. And please leave comments and questions for us throughout the presentations and the night sky tour. We love engaging with you and asking questions. And just a heads up, we are going to be using Mentimeter today. So if you have a mobile device or something, get that handy. All right, so let's get this party started. Passing it over to Cass.
All right, I'm just arranging my screen here.
Very good.
There we go. Everyone can see that. All right, I'm excited. So thank you for having me as your guest this evening, Oletha and Science North. So I'm a planetary geologist and I'm an analog scientist, and I specialize in meteorite impact craters, which are set in lunar and Martian analog environments. Those are sites on Earth that have similarities in a variety of ways to environments on places like the Moon and Mars. So as you can imagine, Moon and Mars are covered in impact craters, so that works very well for me. I've also been working on analog missions for about 14 years, and I've taken part in some 15 really large-scale missions funded by the Canadian Space Agency and NASA. So today, what I'm hoping to do is introduce you to analog missions and give you a couple of examples of some of the missions I've been privileged to be a part of. And really, to answer this question on my slide here, how do we prepare for missions to space? Analog missions are a big part of that. So here are a few examples of real mission scenarios that we might need to prepare for. So for example, you've got a human mission to the moon. This is actually Charlie Duke on Apollo 16. There's an example of him with his sort of lunar buggy in the bottom and mission control in the center. And on the right, there's there's Perseverance rover on Mars. And so now I'd like you to use your imagination and think, okay, what type of mission would you like to take? Would you like to send to space? What are your objectives? And then you have to think about all the things you might need to plan for, to build, to test. How are you going to communicate with your astronauts or your rover or your orbiter or lander? How are you going to navigate? What system is going to be in place to manage that mission? You know, typically we do this from a center of control or communications. We call that mission control. I'm sure you've heard that term before. And mission controls are very, very structured. Everyone in there, the whole crew, has a very specific role, responsibilities, and there's procedures to follow very strictly. And those change based on that mission scenario, whether it's rovers or humans or where you are or how far you are, what the communications are. And so there's hundreds of questions like these that need answers, and you have to figure all this out before you can actually send a spacecraft or humans to space or to another planetary body. Especially, you know, in the case of astronauts, there's lives at stake, so you don't want to take any chances. You want to come up with, you know, all of those contingencies. You want to fix any problems way ahead of time. And of course, there's a lot of money invested as well. So what is an analog mission? It's a simulated mission designed to learn, to test, and train in preparation for real missions to space, and of course to engage all of you, engage the public, and get you all excited about space, because space is awesome. So we're preparing science and technology and operations required for upcoming missions. And sometimes we're just testing to show this mission is feasible. We're figuring out what works, what doesn't, before we try to do it for real. And we get to do real science at the same time, which is an added bonus, especially for researchers such as myself. So depending on the analog mission's goals, there are small scale missions where you're just trying to test one part, one particular part of a mission, or there's large scale missions where you practice run, we call it a dry run from start to finish, the whole thing, every part, everything's integrated. So we call those, it's like a mock mission from beginning to end. So there's a big range of what these could entail. Typically, these missions are conducted in analog environments. I mentioned this for my particular studies, but again, there are locations that have physical similarities to extreme environments on another planetary body or just in space. And these are places where we conduct real analog science, where we can extrapolate something that we've learned on Earth and compare it to another world to learn more about that world. Actually, we do that vice versa as well. So many of these places happen to be in remote locations on Earth with very little vegetation, the very isolated places like hot deserts, like in the desert in Utah. We use that as a Mars analog quite often. And we also use Arctic deserts, both in the Canadian Arctic, like in the north, and in Arctic deserts in Antarctica. This top image here is actually where I did most of my fieldwork for my PhD thesis. This is the hot and impact structure on Devon Island. It's the biggest uninhabited island in the world, and it's part of Canada. And it's also a meteorite impact crater is situated fairly centered onto it. But there's also another site that we use, the Masten Lake impact structure in northern Labrador. And I won't go into these missions today, but there's also volcanic sites, such as the Mauna Loa volcano in Hawaii, where we have a habitat where we test human factors missions, essentially. All right, click on the next one. So what are we testing? We're testing new technologies, we're testing rovers, robots, we're testing all sorts of things, communications, operations and procedures that need to be run in mission control. How are we gonna power that rover? How big of a solar panel do you need? And then when it comes to human missions and also just team in mission control, behavioral effects, things like isolation and confinement, team dynamics. How do you choose the right team of astronauts to complete that mission? What are the factors that you need to look out for? Menu fatigue. In that high seas mission I just showed you, they did 4 months just figuring out, how to keep astronauts, analog astronauts happy. What do you feed them if you can only feed them dehydrated and freeze-dried foods? How do you keep that menu, variety and palatable and healthy, so of course nutritious. And then all analogs provide us data. They give us information about the strengths and the limitations of things, the validity of planned human robotic exploration operations. And what I mean by that is, if someone proposes a mission, it could be proof. You can say, here, we've done this analog mission, it works, this has value, we should do this. And we're going to apply that all to real missions and have done. Some of the missions I'm going to tell you about today. I did actually get to meet with fairly recently folks that are planning the Artemis missions going back to the moon, and got to share what we've learned so that they could apply it to those real missions. So I'm pretty excited about that. But so this allows us to take countermeasures before trying things in space to modify and improve our technology, our operations, and our understanding of the science before we put the money and the time in. So here's a few images of our Canadian astronauts. We have 4 active Canadian astronauts right now, and they're currently training for potential upcoming missions. In the top left is David Saint-Jacques. He's already gone to space, but this is him in training in a giant swimming pool at NASA, where they have a mock-up of the International Space Station. And he was training for his EVA. So when you go outside the station and complete a task. You have to don on the astronaut suit. But he had to practice that multiple times. And that's a form of an analog mission. From start to finish, he had to do everything, don on the suit, and complete all of his tasks within the time period required. In the top right, that's Jenny Seide. She's doing a simulation to learn how to use the Canadarm2. This is just a fun one I threw in. A couple of them are doing a parabolic flight to train for weightlessness. And then the bottom right is actually myself and Jeremy Hansen, whom has come to the Arctic with us on a number of expeditions to train in geology and isolation. So working in a remote environment and doing real science. And now, I would trust Jeremy to collect the rock samples that I would want him to collect if ever he gets to walk on the moon. And we actually get to bring Joshua Kutrick up this September. So I'm excited for that too. So yes, astronauts do analog missions, but astronauts are not the only, type of missions that we send. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people that are involved in a wide variety of space missions, and they all need training, they all need practice, and all of these missions need to be run through. Mission control crew, each of those roles needs to be trained for. If you're developing a new instrument to put on a rover, we've never used that instrument before. We don't know what that data is like. We need to practice getting that data, making sure it's all, in order, it's properly standardized, and we know what we're looking at so that we can prove, hey, this is what we've found. So doing these missions, we're not only, training those that we already send to space, but we're developing capabilities through these missions in Canada so that we have really highly qualified people to participate in real missions in a variety of ways. So last month's speaker, Raymond Francis, who today he gets to basically drive 2 different rovers and fire lasers on Mars for the Curiosity and Perseverance rover. He actually participated in a number of the analog missions that I didn't. And he's sort of our poster child to say, hey, this training works. And I can't move on without pointing out, of course, that there are real Apollo 16 astronauts, actually Apollo 15, I believe as well. But this is Charlie Duke and John Young doing analog training in Sudbury. Sudbury, and I'm sure most of you know this, is an impact crater and hosts some breccias that are similar to those you might find on the moon. And so they did a series of training and geological training missions when they donned on sort of fake suits and instruments that they would have on the moon. So these are a bunch of mission patches of some of the missions that I've participated in. I'm going to focus on the ones for the moon today because everything's all about the moon. We're going back to the moon very soon. So I'll just dabble in a couple of those ones. So we did run a Sudbury analog mission. We called it SLAM. And basically we were in a gravel pit, HCA Sand and Gravel, which is just south of the city. And we were imitating roverable terrain on the moon. And so this on the left is just a geological map of Sudbury showing all the layers of that impact structure. And this is a chart laying out the decisions that mission control will make, how they make the decisions, in what order they make the decisions based on the data that they get back. And this is just, don't try and read any of this, but just to show you sort of, this is one of the simplified versions, the complexity of these things. So it's not just train that person in the role that they have, it's training them in the whole, how does the system work to make the mission work. Another one of our objectives primarily was, so it was just a robotic mission, this one, was testing our rover capabilities, because our rover was able to, we would drive it to a point and then go somewhere else, and it could autonomously, so by itself, return to a previously visited point using LiDAR telemetry. And that just means that we had an instrument on board that used a laser to make a map without images, just with the laser, just pointing points of light. And it made this map that you see here. This is actually the path that the rover took. We had a naming scheme for Arthur and the Round Table. That's why you see things like Arthur and Merlin. And those are all the sites of interest that we visited. This is our mission control team, or one view of them. And I was part of the field team at this point. This is our rover team. This is a rover we called the Rock 6. This is a collaboration between Western University and University of Toronto and the Canadian Space Agency, of course funded by the Canadian Space Agency. And this is an example of where we had to green card, so we couldn't put everything that we wanted on the rover, like a coring drill. So this is myself and Mark here, and we're pretending to be one of the rover's arms to take a sample, but mission control never saw us. Of course, we turned the camera off, we took the sample, and then we just showed them the sample. So some things, you can't test everything, but you do the best you can to have the highest fidelity mission possible. So this was a great success, and it was a great practice for the next mission that we ran, which was a series of deployments to the Masten Lake impact structure, where again, we ran a lunar analog sample return. So in this case, we ran multiple scenarios over a series of weeks. We went to several different sites. It took a lot of planning. We're really in a remote location, and we brought a lot of technology with us. But the point of it was to determine the feasibility of humans and rovers, basically, working together, human-robotic cooperation. So how are human missions enabled by robots? Is it beneficial to send a robot ahead and scout? Is it beneficial to leave the robot behind after you're done and collect more information? Or is it beneficial, or is it just a waste of time to have a robot assistant right there and you could teleoperate the rover, or is that a waste of the astronaut's time? And that turned out to be the case. It was a waste of the astronaut's time. But the precursor and the postcursor, so the before and after, that was very very useful. We were also training a large team on sample selection and instrument uses. And I should point out that these are now 2 sites in Canada that I've pointed out, but Masten is actually one of the best lunar analog sites in the world because it has it's the only crater with a very large amount of anorthosite, which is the rock that is found in the highlands on the moon, so the bright parts of the moon. It is most abundant in this crater above all other craters that we've identified so far, and there's almost 200 of them. And so this is what that looks like. This is an example of, actually this is Raymond and Anna. They were our astronauts for this mission. We were testing out communications. This is mission control. This is Mel, she's our Capcom. And again, the Rock 6 with a different set of instruments, but here Raymond is using the rover as an assistant, and then here the rover is operating on its own. And of course, we had other side projects going on at the same time. We were testing, we had medical staff on board testing remote medicine. We had psychological testing and surveys. They were taking saliva from us because we're in a stressful remote situation. They were evaluating how our stress changed based on what activities we were completing during the day and things like that. And then my most recent mission is the CAN-MOON mission, Lunar Sample Return Analog Mission, very similar to what we did in Sudbury, but more detailed and longer mission. And so this was part of the Canadian Space Agency's Flights and Fieldwork for Science and Technology initiative, something we applied for. I was at Western University and we collaborated with the University of Manitoba, and I was the overall mission manager. And essentially we simulated sending a rover to the Schrodinger crater on the moon, which is near the South Pole. And we sent a field team to Lanzarote in the Canary Islands, Spain. And of course, we had mission control back at Western University. We had a team of 56. And the reason we chose Lanzarote is because the Schrodinger crater actually has volcanoes in it. It's not only an impact crater, it also has volcanoes. It's a pretty awesome place. And Lanzarote is a volcanic island and it has very fresh volcanic lava flows. And so it was a perfect analog environment in which to test out our operations. And so the CSA had basically asked us to develop operations to put a rover on the moon. And how do you run mission control for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 14 days straight? For one lunar day is 14 days straight. You need to build in shift work. There's a lot of different things that need to be thought through. And having a rover on the moon, it doesn't work the same as having a rover on Mars. Mission control works differently. There's no delay in communications or no significant delay, things like that. And then we also trained a lot of Canadian students because we were such a large team. We learned a lot about the geology in Lanzarote. We also tested virtual reality. And then some of the mission control team we actually sent to Lanzarote afterwards to see how closely, what their perspective was getting data and images back from the rover versus standing there in real life. Before our mission or deployment actually occurred, we took a lot of data sets, real data sets that are similar to those, we can call them analog data sets, to those that we have on the moon. We took those data sets from satellites of Lanzarote, the island of that volcanic field, and we made a basic geological map, things like topography and imagery, and we got to do a site selection workshop and instrument training long before we ever sent our analog rover to the site. And then this is just a sort of a summary caption of what the mission looked like. This is our whole team for mission control. These are the folks in the field. You can see that sort of this just blocky lava behind them. This is the rover that we were simulating. This is the Juno rover, the Canadian Space Agency's Juno rover. And this is mission control. We had one large science room and one large planning room, which is basically where you navigate the rover from. So one room of engineers and one room of scientists, and then we were connected through comms, and then we could just run out the door and talk to them back and forth if we needed to. So it was a great success, and CSA was happy. And this is my last mission. I only put this in here. This is actually some Mars mission I got to do, but because Oletha had a very similar experience, I've done two missions, two two-week-long missions at the Mars Desert Research Station in Utah, where they're basically simulating human factors. So living and working on Mars, everything about this, you're isolated in the desert in Utah. You have a team of a couple of scientists and a couple of engineers all working together. Each person has their very separate role, but then, you come together. It works very similar to how it does in the International Space Station. Everyone has their job during the day, and then you come together at meal times, or you do EVAs together. You must don on the suit to go outside, and so on. So that was a wonderful experience. So I'll end it there. I wish I could show you more because there's so much to show, but I'll end it there. And just to say that all of you could participate in a variety of ways if you're interested. I mentioned in one of those early slides to engage. We really do want to engage the public, and most of the time when there's real missions or these analog missions going on, there's media coverage, there's blogs, there's things going on in social media that you can follow along. If you're 18 and over, you can actually apply to be in one of these lunar analogs or Martian analogs, and often they're looking for people with no experience. You don't necessarily need experience. And we have had undergraduate and high school students participate in our mission control in a variety of ways too. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll hand it over.
Oh, that was amazing, Cass. Thank you so much. I know this is kind of a silly question, but you told us about Mars. You've spelled Mars with your shadows, but how did you do the exclamation mark?
So that was after the mission. We all sort of did a fun EVA. Yeah. So one of us actually took our helmets off, put the helmet on the ground, and then jumped in the air over it as the snap.
That's awesome. We also have an audience question. So Stephen McIntyre is asking, he's my husband, of all the factors you talked about, sort of testing and learning about when you are doing an analog mission, is team dynamics one of the harder ones, or is there something that is really even more challenging?
Team dynamics is definitely a challenge, and it always is, no matter the scenario. I would say when you have astronauts, it's far more challenging. I feel like mission control, there are, when you're off shift, you can escape and recoup, and people come back refreshed and calmed down, things like that. But when you're constantly in the field, that's definitely a challenge. I would say, aside from that, actually, the biggest challenge in most of the cases is communications. It's a huge bottleneck, and even in real missions, communications is a bottleneck. And when we're in remote locations like that, we're using satellite comms. So I actually had, as we were trying, Capcom was trying to speak directly with our astronauts. Raymond, who has, he's an aviator, he has a radio voice. They could, London, this is Raymond. They could understand him very clearly. And then the female astronaut, her voice is higher pitched just naturally. And they could not, the radio, it was voice over IP too. So the radio was not doing her any justice. And so we ended up having, Raymond would translate what she'd say and back. And anyways, it gets messy. Communication gets messy.
Yeah.
And then just data amounts. So.
Yeah. It's one of the things about being female, because there's environments that it works for men to just use your voice, like on a for me, it was a factory fishing boat. But I actually started pitching my voice deep. So that,
it matters. It's so
I could do what everyone else was doing. Yeah. I think you kind of answered. So Julie Huggins is asking, but really specifically about the Utah simulation. Like, what was the hardest or most frustrating thing to do with that? Was it still comms there, or did you find something else?
Oh, actually, no, comms was really good when we were there. So one of those missions, we were actually a group of Canadian Americans, and the second mission was multicultural, like a very wide range of cultures. And there was a few culture clashes. When you're living in really close quarters, that tends to happen, especially when you have very sort of eccentric personalities put together. And I would say that astronaut selection is very important.
I remember Mel saying that, like, you had a picture of her in the presentation, and when I was there with her, that's one of the things she said. It was like, yeah, getting selection right is challenging. And the Canadian Space Agency, this last round, they did a bunch of cool stuff that they'd never done before to help them make the selection. And they're really trying to make it more and more science-based, which is cool. Okay, I see we have, oh, hi, Renita. Okay, we're gonna take one last question because I'm definitely excited to hear from Kirsten. So we're gonna go over to her next, coming right up, hearing about Planetarium in Toronto and how you might be able to help make that happen. But first, Julie has a follow-up question. Is it hard to transition from eating freeze-dried food for a long time and then going back to your normal diet? Or like, is it hard transitioning to freeze-dried? How did you handle that?
So being a field geologist, I spend for many years, I spent every summer just eating dried food. So I had become very accustomed to it. So when you're in the habitat, it was a piece of cake. But I will say, going back to normal food, no, there's no problem at all. The first restaurant, you order the biggest, lasagna and Caesar salad and things that you can't get in the field. But for some people who are particular eaters, it's tough to transition into it and not get sick of it after a while. But you know what? We've made leaps and bounds, and some of it can be really good. It's not like it's bad food once it's rehydrated. Sometimes, like chili, you rehydrate chili, you'd never know it was dried.
Yeah, it's good.
Awesome.
Well, and it's interesting because food is really one of those things that kind of can help with team dynamics, right? Help bring a group together or push a group away. On one of our missions, we used all freeze-dried and like just a little bit of fresh supplement from the greenhouse. And then on the other one, we kind of just bought groceries and cooked and took turns cooking. And there was something that really helped build relationships, right? In taking turns cooking, sort of sharing food that was more cultural. I don't know. Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And we are definitely going to ask you more questions. Stick around. But let's head over and hear from Kirsten.
Hi, thank you. Wow, this is a very different combination of things, because I was thinking, wow, I've never been on any kind of analog mission. I've been camping. I've had freeze-dried food before, but wow, that's really amazing stuff. But I want to talk about a less, perhaps, I don't know, a different kind of simulation. So I just want to ask, is my presentation showing as it's supposed to? I don't think it is. I'm sorry. It's I'm going to have to go back and fix this. Just a sec. Okay. How's that? Is that showing correctly now?
We'll just give Renata a sec to pull it up.
Okay.
We're still seeing all the sidebar stuff.
Yeah, you're probably just going to continue to see this. Okay, I'm just going to share the other one because I think, Renata, I think I'm sharing the wrong thing. So just excuse me. You'd think I know how to do this since I use this all the time as well. But there it is. There. How does that look?
Beautiful.
Excellent. Okay. So my name is Kirsten Vanstone, and I'm here from Space Place Canada. But I am really happy to also say that I worked for a long time at the Ontario Science Centre, and we have a lot of great trips up to Science North. And I also noticed that the RESC Sudbury Centre is on. Hello, Linda. It's nice to see you with another hat on. But I'm here today to talk about a different kind of simulated mission, and that is a planetarium. I don't know how many of you have actually been to a planetarium before. I'm hoping that some of you may have, and that if you have, that you, I'm just going to try and see the screen again. No, I'm not going to be able to do that. Okay, that if you have been to a planetarium, you'll know why I'm excited about it. If you don't know this, Toronto, which is, of course, Canada's biggest city, doesn't have a major planetarium. It's got a lot of really good smaller ones, got some portable ones and a little one at the Ontario Science Centre, which is actually where I started my planetarium journey, but we don't have a large one anymore. It actually closed in 1995. And my group and many other people believe that this is a major gap in the city of Toronto. And in fact, it's a problem for all of Canada as well. We have a lot of really great planetariums in Canada, including, of course, the one at Science North. But I want to give you a little walkthrough why we think this is important to sparking imagination and providing a pipeline for all those people who would be interested in going on analog missions, maybe becoming astronauts, or if not astronauts, then engineers, or people who tell stories that might have to do with space. So we think the planetarium is a good place for all of those things to get kicked off. So we like to say that our goal is to create a 21st century virtual planetarium for Canada and the world. We are building an accessible educational website and a physical space place in downtown Toronto. This would be serving educational and tourist needs. Now, planetarium theaters, if you don't know, I noticed we had somebody watching from Sacramento. Perhaps they may recognize this. This is a planetarium from mid-1960s that is pretty typical of what these things used to be like. And if you went to one as perhaps you're a little older like me and you went to one of these as a kid, you'll remember you sat down in a circular row of seats and looked up at a dome, and that big weird machine in the middle of the room would project the stars onto the ceiling. The ceiling, of course, you see here is white, but of course, when you turn the lights off, it goes dark and becomes the dome of the sky above you. I'd say that this photograph is pretty typical of a planetarium, only this particular one was a little bit different because they actually made the projector themselves. And I'm showing it because I worked there for 6 years, so it's my prerogative. I'm going to show the one that I really fell in love with. Nowadays, in 2020, if you were to go to a planetarium that was the size of this one, so about 300 seats. Well, you probably wouldn't find one with 300 seats, but what you would find instead is something more like what the Morrison Planetarium looks like now. So instead of sitting underneath a dome with a big machine in the middle of the room, you look up at a dome and you can either use that as the sky, or you can fly around to visit the planets. Planetariums were originally made to actually show the motions of the planets through the sky. Putting the stars up on the sky was another part of what they did, and it became very important for people who, living in cities, couldn't see the night sky much anymore with all the light pollution around. But nowadays, they've grown to not only taking you to see a night sky, but actually taking you into the solar system, beyond to the galaxies. You can actually travel out as far basically as you want. And they use different types of technology now using digital projectors. So if you're familiar with the Science North Planetarium, you'll know that they use digital projectors to show things up on the dome. So tonight, later, after I stop talking, you're going to get a tour of the night sky using Stellarium. Stellarium is actually a piece of software that powers a lot of digital planetariums like this. So you can have this little pocket version on your flat screen, but imagine going into a theater and having it go all the way around you. It's very immersive. Now, why is this important? Well, these places have been around for a while now, and they are places that really inspire people. But I can say that trying to make a representation or a simulation of the night sky is not something that started with the planetarium. This is something that's been happening for an awfully long time. It's clearly, if we look back in human history, something that cultures around the globe have talked about. So I believe my next picture shows two historic simulations of the sky. On the left, we have something nearly 2,000 years old. It's called the Farnese Atlas, and it is a carving of Atlas, you know, the historic, the mythological figure from Greek mythology holding up the sky, and the globe on his back is showing the classical constellations. And on the right, we're seeing, I don't know if it's left or right. Anyway, the one that is a photograph of a landscape is from Alberta, and you can see that wheel in the ground there with the spokes coming out. This is known as a medicine wheel and has many different uses and significance to the Indigenous builders who built it. But among those is that it can help track the sky and tell you what time of year it is. So it's sometimes referred to as the Canadian Stonehenge. I actually think these medicine wheels, as they're known, are really very interesting, and maybe even more interesting than Stonehenge. But the simulation of the sky that we want to build originally was made, the first planetarium projector was made in 1923. It was made in Berlin, and the company that made the projector was called Zeiss, which you've probably heard of, very famous German optical company. So this is the Zeiss Mark I. I've actually went to visit this planetarium about 30 years ago, and it doesn't use this projector anymore, but it's still a pretty old-fashioned place where you went in and sat and looked at the sky. But we will be celebrating its centennial in 2023. But the first planetarium to actually arrive in the North Americas was the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, and I actually forgot to look up what date it came. It was about the 1930s. And then they started spreading across North America, they're spreading across Europe, but they got really, really popular in the 1960s around the time of the moonshots. So what happened, as you may know, with the space race is that, especially in the United States, when Sputnik got up first and the Russians were perceived as winning the space race, they started building planetariums everywhere to make sure that the American kids could learn the sky and be inspired to go into space and help the US in its bid to win the space race. Maybe not the best motivation necessarily, but it did, in a sense, kind of help spread these things, which I happen to think are very positive things in the world. Canada has about 20 permanent planetariums, roundabout. I forgot to count them all, but there are about 20 there. We also have a lot of blow-up ones. These are ones that actually are portable. They inflate like a blow-up tent, or, you know, they're really neat. They look like igloos, and they have projectors inside, and many of those are available. You may have seen them if you've traveled around to different places. The Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto has one. The University of Toronto has one. They're smaller. They can accommodate about a class, maybe two classes. They're bigger, but they're not as the experience is different than what you get when you go into a really, really big dome. I want to show you a little piece of what you can do in a modern planetarium. I found this today and I thought it was a really cool video. I'm just going to bring it up and let it play. You can see this is the Earth. It's an image taken by the GOES satellite, I can't remember which one, on a day in December 2020. And I wonder if you can tell what's happening. Time is passing and the sun is rising on various parts of the Earth. We're slowly uncovering South America, and you can see the Caribbean Sea now, Central America, in Mexico. You can see the lights of the cities slowly fading away as the sun comes up. But that dark spot coming across the bottom, that's actually the shadow of the moon blocking out the sun during a solar eclipse. And then you see night falling again. So we have a full day of the Earth. What I really like about this video is that you can also see the clouds moving. Of course, the GOES satellite is a weather satellite, so you can see the clouds moving along and actually see our Earth from space and capture an amazing astronomical event. Imagine that on a dome over your head so big that you felt like you were floating in orbit around the Earth. I think that is pretty cool stuff. Now, planetariums around the world aren't just confined to the star projectors and star theaters. I have some photographs here from a guy who actually builds planetariums around the world. On the upper left is a galaxy garden that is located in Hawaii that I think is a beautiful thing. Down below here, I can't remember where this is, but I think it might be at the Trottier Observatory at Simon Fraser University. Those rainbow colors on the stairs are actually a solar spectrum. So that's actually real sunlight being split up and run down the stairs. And then on the upper right, you have somebody giving a tour of the Earth with a 3D sort of projected Earth, which is pretty cool. And then another that I want to show you that's actually in Quebec, just next door. This is a new facility that opened recently near Sutton, Quebec. And it is an outdoor amphitheater built to look at the night sky. It's called the Observe Etoile facility, and several members of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada Montreal Centre are actually presenters at this place. So it's like an outdoor planetarium. So we saw the sort of morphing from those old school star theaters to more modern digital projectors, and now to places that are incorporating the actual outdoors, all helping to show people the night sky. Why I believe this is important is that I think a lot of people, not just me, were introduced to the night sky for the first time in a planetarium. Many people cannot get out to a spot like Sutton and be out in the nice dark sky and have someone show them the stars. It just is not possible for a lot of people. So having a planetarium available to you to do this will help get people who are living in urban settings in touch with the night sky. I think it's a very important thing. I want to read a couple of quotes that we collected when we started our project. And one of them is from Randy Atwood, who some of you may know. He's a former president of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, former executive director of that same organization. And he says here, spending time at the McLaughlin Planetarium in Toronto as a teenager, I was introduced to the amazing world of astronomy and other areas of science, and I was immediately hooked. And of course, he went on and worked in this area and has produced a lot of astronomical communications over the years. But one audience that we think it's really important to reach is the audience like Abby, age 10, grew up in Toronto, has never been to a planetarium, but I think it'd be really cool. I'd like to see black holes and the first stars and learn about both of those things. And then my favorite quote that we collected from another student about the same age, Liam, who would like to visit Mars. He would bring back food with me, and if I have leftovers, I'd bring them back to Earth, and also some space rocks. This is the type of person that we really want to inspire. Liam already has some great imagination and can see himself going to Mars. But there are a lot of people who may not even think that this is something for them. We've done a lot of work with people like MDA and other companies that are working in space. And one thing that we keep hearing is that it's not just engineers that are going to be needed to get us into space. We're going to need other people with skills like designers and marketers and people who can tell the stories of going to space. We also know that if Canada as a country is going to spend a lot of money on sending people to space, and it is expensive, that the Canadian citizens who are supporting this with their tax dollars should also be benefiting from it. We know as people who love space and the sky that there's a lot to be given back by this exploration. There's a lot of benefits for us back down on Earth, but I think we need a place to tell those stories, and specifically to tell the stories of Canada in space and Canada's contributions to astronomy, and that is our hope for Space Place. So I'd like to invite you, if you can, to visit spaceplacecanada.ca. That's our very nascent website, is just getting put together, and find out a little bit more about us and how you can maybe help our project along, and anything that you'd like to see us do with Space Place Canada. We have this website, we have YouTube channel, Space Place Canada, and we're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So I hope that you will look us up and perhaps get involved with our project. We're looking for volunteers because it takes quite a lot of work to do what we're doing. And we've been at it for a couple of years now and have some interesting leads. So we're hoping to have a bit more news in the near future, but you can imagine that COVID has kind of slowed us down a little bit. But we're really happy to have had the chance to tell you about it today at Science North, who we would hope would be one of our good friends when we get going. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Kirsten. That was very rich. There was so much good content there. One of the things you talked about the space race. Do you kind of feel like we're kind of entering like a new kind of maybe more like cooperative space race? Like,
I would hope so. I think that's a great question, and I think back to a time when I held a debate about whether or not we should go to Mars. And I mean, I think most of us sitting here probably think, yes, we should go to Mars, but there are people who don't because, it's expensive, and there's the whole thing about taking Earth's problems elsewhere. But one of the things that came up was Bob Thirsk, who said, when the Canadian astronauts said that these big cooperative space missions and space races are times when diplomacy is required. And if you don't have it, you can't do this. And I feel that the space race, even as it was, did bring about it was competition, and perhaps it was a little bit nasty, but eventually we did start cooperating, and I would like to think that's true.
Yeah.
I think it's a different space race now for sure than it was last time. I think maybe we've got the race between Bezos and Branson or whatever, but hopefully that will be, hopefully that will help spark imagination in other people, and we'll see what comes of it.
Being able to just like the first step, honestly, in getting out there and exploring space, and even just learning about the universe, understanding more, is imagining that you can do it, and taking the time to like imagine what might be happening, and to start to engage with it. I was doing presentations for kids in public schools, and I found the kids that were in the like enriched classes got super excited because they could totally imagine themselves being astronauts. And then the kids in the applied classes were less excited because they were like, this isn't me, I'm not going to go, you know?
Yeah.
And I said the same thing you did. You know, it's going to take everybody to actually create communities off planet. So we are going to need plumbers and electricians and engineers and artists, right? And a lot of imagination.
Yep.
One of my professors, she was the first Japanese woman to go to space, Shaki Mukai. And one of the things she always said was, if you can dream it, you can do it. And
you know what? That's kind of our saying at Space Place, because we really have been dreaming about this for a long time. So we hope to be able to do this so that we can inspire more people, as you say. The neat thing about a planetarium that I didn't really get into is that it's nowadays, it's not so much the astronomers talking in a planetarium. The people who do the actual work are illustrators and animators and scientific visualization people. It's actually a really powerful tool. And I remember sitting in the Morrison Planetarium in San Francisco and having an astronomer come in and put some slides up that we'd made for him to show a structure that he was studying on the whole dome. And he said, wow, he was noticing stuff that he had never seen before because of that way of seeing it.
That is so neat. That is so neat.
It is.
Feedback and feed into the science. Linda Playa from the Sudbury Center for the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada is just calling out that we do have a really terrific older non-digital planetarium at Laurentian University.
The Duran Planetarium, I believe.
Yes, the Duran Planetarium. And that's normally where they hold their club meetings. It's a very cool place to see. And they've done lots of public sessions there, and it's a lot of fun for all ages. And Linda, if you don't mind dropping the link into your RAS website, that would be great. I think people might have.
Linda, I'm going to come up and visit because I haven't been there in a long time, and I'd like to see it.
Yeah. Okay, great. So this is the section where we see how well you've been listening. We test your current space knowledge a little and just have fun, play around, and also get you prepared for our visitor feedback sort of survey at the end of our session, which is coming up quickly. Wish I had more time with you guys. So how this works is you can use the computer you're on, just like open another window, or you can use a mobile device. You just need to go to the website, www.menti.com. It's up on the screen. And you want to use the code 81823153. And this is just sort of a warm up so we can see like who's here. And you can choose multiple things, hopefully, if I set up right. What are you most excited about Canada sending to the moon? So we've got, I think we can make sure I don't have to like hit enter or something. So you can actually, yes. Okay. Can anyone, I'm not seeing anyone. Oh, yes. Okay, it's working. Was that you, Cass?
No.
When we did this right away, he got on there. He's like, okay, I'm doing it. Okay. And I have also, I have been informed there is a delay here, right? There's about a 30-second delay. So we have to make banter. Give people about 30 seconds, see, to bring in the question. So
should I be answering these questions?
Do you want to go to the moon?
I will probably never have that opportunity, but yes. Would you guys want to go?
I actually would. I recently read Artemis, Andy Weir, who did The Martian, and he did a whole book about the moon, and it really got me thinking about what it would be like to live in a moon base. I love science fiction. That's another gateway drug to space.
When I was thinking about the role of imagination in space exploration, I was definitely thinking about science fiction novels, and even with other technologies too, right? We wrote about satellites, which are doing a huge amount of Earth observing right now, and really helping us, work through the environmental crisis that we're in. And those were something that just existed, as an idea in a science fiction novel. Somebody imagined them before they existed. And telephones, I can probably think of other examples.
There are a whole bunch. I could go on. That would be a whole other show. Yeah, we should do that. Katrina Cole, who's joined us, does say she would go to the moon. So, all right,
too, for sure. Okay, cool. So let's get into the quiz here now. If I can advance the slide, I'm having like a not advancing the slide moment. Okay. I know you're seeing.
That's most of my moments. So
that's most of them.
Yeah.
So if I hit present, I think you might have seen something. Okay. Now we're getting into a question. All right. So here we go. So you answer fast, you get more points. I know that's like kind of biased towards connectivity. Here we go. So the question is, are you ready to play? Who's out there? Who's ready to play? You get points for this. Like, right. I think you saw it. Again, we're warming up here.
I like the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, and that video in your presentation, Kirsten, was awesome.
Oh my gosh.
It's pretty neat. Yeah. So you can get that from the International Planetarium Society, IPS. It's a pretty cool video. Yeah.
I like it.
Okay. So we've got 4 people who are ready to play. We've got 5 people online. Okay. So question 2 of 3. Let's see.
Oh.
That was nothing. I think I didn't wait long enough for it to pop up, maybe.
Oh.
We'll see. Oh yeah, and I have to hit enter.
I can see it.
I'm like, this is, I'm learning how to drive here. Okay. On an analog space station, so this one's multiple choice. Learn, test, train, or engage. And you can choose more than one, I hope.
Oh.
Yeah. To do on an analog mission. Things you'd like to do. Awesome. So you can do all those things on an analog mission. It's the whole package. And definitely you're learning. You got that right. Okay, question 3 of 3. Hit enter to start countdown. Got it. We're on here. Oh, what is an imaginative way you have solved a problem? I like that one, empathy. Oh, and Katrina had learn, train, test, which is good.
Oh, yeah. Kids are always smarter than you are, right?
I'm pretty sure that was President Stephen asking my son Clark, because he's like, right now, like if we learn to play a game together, he just beats us hands down. Like if it's an old game like chess that we learned a long time ago, we can still challenge him. But when we learn together now, he just like every time.
Yeah, I have no hope. That was my 13-year-old, my 12-year-old as well. Mm-hmm. Either of them will solve most of my problems for me. If it's technology anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, especially technology.
Yeah.
I kind of have that sense, like when you're a teenager, you spend a lot of time forming your worldview, sort of deciding what's true, how things are, the global situation. And then you kind of get this like working model in your head. And then you just kind of use that and you start operating and you start working and you start doing stuff. And as long as you're sort of living your life all right, there's not a huge need to like update the mental model, and you get news and you kind of start. But I feel like it's really, really great talking to kids because they have like a fresh model of like how the world actually is. They're investing time in it.
I think that combining knowledge answer is a really, really good one as well. I think using knowledge from different areas is probably where it's most exciting when you're trying to solve a problem.
Yeah. People talk about intersectionality a lot now.
Mhm.
That we're in the intersection between this and this and this. And I think we are realizing that we need that collaboration, interdisciplinary approach to our problems, leading with empathy, to really solve.
I think we've solved the problem. This group, whoever's watching, you should apply for like to go to the moon or whatever. Yeah.
Or at least an analog mission.
Or at least an analog mission.
Yeah.
I would like to do that. That looks really cool.
If you're under 18, just keep imagining it. Wait till you see
Yeah.
it. It's awesome. Okay, these are beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and next slide. So we have our leaderboard. Oh, Watson, way out front. Well done. You were paying attention. Love it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for a bit, and we will pass the spotlight over to Lucy and get a bit of a night sky tour in here before we wrap up. What's up in the night sky tonight, Lucy?
Hello. Yeah, we're going to be taking just a quick look at the night sky with these amazing presentations. We'll just take a really quick look. I'm using, as it was mentioned, Stellarium. I'm in fact showing the free web-based version of Stellarium, stellarium-web.org. The link is in the description. But looking towards the south, we get to see a lot of really neat things. Now, if you want to take a look at the stars, naturally, it's good to be far enough away from any big cities and towns where there's a lot of light pollution. But we also want to wait a little bit after sunset, because if you go right at sunset, it's not dark enough yet. So I like to tell people to wait at least an hour after sunset to start seeing stars. We're looking at our sky at 10:38 currently, 10:39. And looking towards the southwest, we get to see the moon. It's just past a quarter moon. So if you do have binoculars or a telescope, you can take a look at the moon. I find looking at the moon near the quarter mark is very neat because you can see the craters really well at that borderline with the shadow and the light. You can see the craters super well. It's something really gorgeous to see. But another thing we get to see looking towards the south, we have this really neat constellation. It is one of the zodiac signs. Right here, we have these stars and some more stars down here that kind of makes this kind of hook. It's a tail with a stinger. So this is Scorpius, or also known as Scorpio. It is a scorpion up in the sky. And it has a nice reddish star that kind of represents its heart. This star is a red supergiant star. It has a reddish tint to it. So a lot of people would in fact mistake this star for the planet Mars. Way back when, they decided to call it Antares, which literally means not Mars, to kind of help us out with that. So we know that this here is not Mars. And we can see a few planets if we wait late enough. So if we wait till around this time, we have Saturn up in the sky. One thing to keep in mind, though, is if there's any trees or any buildings in the way, it's hard to see the things that are closer to the horizon. So if you're in a nice open field or somewhere really high up, you'll get to see Saturn just a little bit earlier if there's nothing blocking your view. And Jupiter, if we wait just a little bit later, we'll get to see. So around 11 o'clock, Jupiter will start rising up in the sky, and that's these two are other really really neat things to see through a telescope or even just binoculars. If you have a pair of binoculars that are strong enough, looking towards Jupiter, you can see these little dots next to it in a nice line. So it is the Galilean moons. It's Jupiter's 4 largest moons. So just with a pair of binoculars, you'll get to see other moons around a whole other planet. Another fun one, Saturn. As some of you guys might know, Saturn has rings. So if you have, for example, a telescope, you'll get to see the rings really well on Saturn. And then looking towards the east, can't really not mention this since we're in the summertime, but if we look at this point really high up in the sky, there's these 3 stars, 3 dots in the sky that make up a nice big triangle. And since it's summertime, this is known as the summer triangle. It's an asterism, a simple formation of stars. That's in fact part of 3 constellations. So we do have here Cygnus the swan with a nice long neck, 2 big beautiful wings. This here is Lyra. It's a music instrument off of this bright star here, Vega. And on the 3rd star for the summer triangle, we have here wings and a tail. So we have Aquila, which is an eagle. So there's a lot of really neat things to see in the night sky, lots of constellations. I just touch on a few of them a little bit. But I think I'm sadly running out of time. So if you would like to see more, learn more, obviously, if you have a planetarium near you, go visit it. If you're around Sudbury, we do have free star parties where we take out our telescope and take a look at stars and constellations, as long as it's not cloudy. So if it's a nice clear night sky, Saturday nights, we'll be having our star parties.
In fact, we are having one tonight. So this is July 17th, and we are excited to be meeting at 10:30 outside of Science North. Our next virtual event is going to be August 14th, and we have an Indigenous storyteller, Will Morin, joining us. It's definitely going to be a treat. And so before we kind of wrap up and do our survey and all that thing, I'm just wondering, Kirsten, do you have any last remarks?
I just thank you, Lucy, for that tour, because it really reminded me of sitting in a planetarium. It was lovely. Thank you. And I hope that I can come up and visit all of you sometime soon.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Cassandra, any last? Okay, sorry, Cass.
Either way. Similarly, thank you so much to all of you and for inviting me. And this is so much fun. And I can't wait to join in the excitement with all of you when we do put real rovers and people on the moon.
Yes, rovers, and did I say that we are sending a robot arm and
yes.
a rover and an astronaut?
Yes.
Might be Jenny. Oh, that would be exciting. I mean, yeah, anyone would be good.
Lots of stuff for all of us to talk about in our museums and planetariums and star parties. It's great.
Exciting time.
So exciting.
So let's call up the survey. If you guys don't mind just sticking around for the little banter bit, I think I let people go ahead with this, so I already have 2, but just in case you're not signed on here, if you could just give us some feedback, that would be great. It helps a lot with our funding. And also, if you enjoyed this content, please do consider donating, liking, or subscribing so that we can give you more of this content, which we absolutely do love to do. So that's great, guys. Thank you. And I will go to the next one. This is just if you're under 18. If you're under 18 and you're here, we'd be curious to know. And if you did learn anything or not about stuff going on with Canada and space, maybe something you didn't know before, go ahead and let us know. I think it's possible we don't have kids on tonight, because usually when we have the kids, we get some interesting, definitely kid questions. They're very fun. Not that you guys aren't fun. You are. I love it. Okay. It doesn't look like we have anyone under 18. I will just put this one up quickly.
I
think someone
Yay! Whoever you are.
Maybe. You know what? I edited the slide. You might have noticed me typing on this because I was like, oh yeah, under 18. Okay. And that was our final question. So I can stop sharing. And I just want to give a big thank you to all of you, to Kirsten, Lucy, Cass, for being here. You made it a lot of fun, a nice way to spend a Saturday evening. And thank you to everybody who joined us live. Merci, miigwech. Keep looking up.
Bye, everyone.